Stand by. We're going live. We're going live. 10, 9, going live. 7, 6, 5, going live. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to 10 Seconds to Air. I'm Alita Guillen. If you're into meditation and mindfulness, then you will be very familiar with today's guest. If you are not, pay attention because she is a pioneer in the field and she may just change your life. Sharon Salzberg is a world-renowned teacher and communicator in meditation and mindfulness. She is a New York Times bestselling author. She is among the first to bring mindfulness and loving-kindness meditation to mainstream American culture nearly 50 years ago. She is co-founder of the Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts, and the author of 13 books, including the New York Times bestseller Real Happiness and her seminal work, Lovingkindness. Earlier this year, she released not one, but 2 books, Real Life and Finding Your Way. And if she's not busy enough, she also hosts the podcast The Metta Hour. She has communicated this 2,500-year-old Buddhist practice with millions of people over the last 50 years. How does she do it? What makes her the best in her field in this massively growing business? And how can she guide us to live a life that is kinder and more loving with mindful communication? I don't have the answer, but I hope she does. So let's ask her. Here now is Sharon Salzberg. Hi, Sharon.
Hi there.
You are on the East Coast, right? I'm on the West Coast. You're in Barre.
I'm in Barre.
How's the weather?
Which you pronounced correctly. The weather is not great. I mean, for winter lovers, it's probably great, but yeah, I'm not amongst them.
So is it safe to assume that you've communicated with millions? What would you say? Thousands, hundreds of thousands?
I don't know, because, the medium, a book, you really don't know how many people read it and or you give a talk. I mean, I've never counted it up, but it's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people. So I have to start with the first question then we'll dive into the rest. But what goes through your mind 10 seconds before you do communicate with these people?
Sometimes I really focus on my intention, like, may this be of benefit. I think I learned a lot during the height of the pandemic when everything was on Zoom, and I became an inveterate chat reader. I felt really close to people, even though and one of the things that happened was that every audience really became pretty international. Yeah. So people would sign in the beginning, I'm from Brazil, I'm calling in from South Africa. I'm like, and you go, whoa. Like, yeah, and I felt very close to people, even though we were not in the same room.
Mm-hmm. So before we get started, I wanted to have you define a few of the terms that I know we're going to end up talking about. What is mindfulness? Let's start with that.
Oh, that is a tough term, actually, because it means different things in different contexts. But as I was taught, I went to India to learn meditation. I was a college student. Mindfulness is a quality of awareness. It's a way of being aware of what's happening in the present moment, without the intrusion of so much bias. So maybe you have lots of historical fear about a certain emotion, for example, and that very emotion arises. So that fear may arise, but it doesn't take over. It doesn't distort how you're seeing the emotion.
Okay.
Or projection into the future. Something comes up and we think, this is it for the rest of my life. So, or a sense of isolation, like I am the only one who ever feels this, whatever. So it's being connected to what's happening in the present moment without having lots of other stuff kind of distort the picture.
Okay. Meditation. What is meditation?
Meditation can mean many things. It's I think of meditation as a skills training. It's a period, doesn't demand a certain posture. You could be lying down, you could be walking, or certainly sitting. But you're dedicating a period of time where your goal is to deepen awareness and compassion, things like that. You're not, say, sitting down to also think of your strategic plan. Mm-hmm. That may come up, but that's not your intention.
Okay. And Buddhism, do you have to be a Buddhist to meditate and practice mindfulness?
No, not at all. My very first teacher in January of 1971 in India was his name was S.N. Goenka, and the first night of the 10-day retreat, which is how I started, he said, the Buddha did not teach Buddhism. The Buddha taught a way of life. And this is in no way about becoming a Buddhist or rejecting anything else. And so for me, I mean, imagine this is the first night.
Yeah.
So it's really like a foundational approach for me, and it's never wavered, really. I really believe that strongly.
So how did you end up here? How did you get started here? This was a long time ago, and
it was a long time ago.
Yeah. Before it was hip. You were hip before it was hip.
That's what people say to me. You did it before it was cool. I don't know which is a hipper thing to say, hip or cool, but maybe neither. Like many people, I had a very traumatic and difficult childhood, and I went to college when I was 16. I was a product of the New York City public school system, which liked to have people skip grades. And when I was a sophomore, so 17, I took an Asian philosophy course. There was a philosophy requirement. Honestly, looking back, I feel like I looked at that schedule and I thought, I'll do that one. It's convenient. Mm-hmm. It's on Tuesday. And the course totally changed my life. So in two ways. One was in talking about the Buddha. They talked a lot about, the professor talked a lot about how the Buddha had a very unafraid, unashamed acknowledgement of the suffering in life. He didn't hide it. And he said, this is a part of life, not as a grim or depressing notion, but hey, this is a part of life. It's natural. And for me, that felt like maybe the first time in my life I felt like I belonged. It wasn't so weird. My family didn't look like other people's families or whatever, but it wasn't so strange. This was a part of life. And then I heard much more thoroughly in the context of that class, there were techniques, there were methods, there were practices called meditation. And if you pursue them, you could be a lot happier. So something really magical happened for me because I was very frightened. I was very timid, I'd never traveled before. I'd never even been to California. And I was going to college in Buffalo. I looked around Buffalo. I didn't see it anywhere. I just wanted to learn how to meditate. And I thought, I'll go to India. So I applied for an independent study program. I created a project saying, I want to go to India and study meditation. And they said, okay. So off I went with my student loans and my scholarships and looking for a teacher.
Were you scared?
I was always scared of everything, but, yes, but that's a fascinating moment for me because, so much of the time we're in the habit of deferring like, oh, it works for other people, but not for me. Or maybe when my life gets like totally together, I can take up this whatever, pursuit or other people can do it. I can't do it. And somehow I didn't fall into that, which would have been my more conditioned state, definitely. But I didn't do that. I thought, I'm going to see what's there for me.
And what was there when you got there?
Well, I wandered around for a while because I was interested in a very specific, I was interested in the how-to, the very practical, grounded. I wasn't interested in a new faith tradition or a new identity at all, or the philosophy. And I finally did find what I was looking for in the context, to begin with, of this intensive 10-day retreat, and met many people at that retreat that I'm still very close to all these many years later, and found really methods that were simple to understand. They were not that easy to do, that I still practice today.
What is your practice?
It's a mixture. The very first practice I ever learned was just sitting and focusing on the sensations of the in and out breath. So that's like a grounding or centering exercise as a foundation. And on top of that, we build a kind of broader mindfulness so that we pay attention in a certain way to what comes up, an emotion, a sensation, if it's very strong. And what I mean by in a certain way is that I think, as far as I know, the earliest sort of measures of mindfulness, once the research began, just were taking into account, are you noticing what you're feeling? Like if you're angry, do you notice you're feeling angry? If you're joyous, so you're noticing you're feeling joyous. But really, mindfulness is a relational quality. It's not about just knowing what's going on. It's being with it without hating it, without being ashamed of it, without freaking out about it or whatever. And so that was a much greater time coming. And that's the whole training. And so we learn to have a different relationship to all of our experience so that we can look at it more deeply and more clearly. And then in 1985, I went to Burma for an intensive 3-month period of loving kindness practice, which is its own technique. And so that became very much my practice. It was all I did for about 4 years. And now it's sort of a blend. I do, in the beginning of my kind of isolation during the pandemic, I thought, I'm going to go back to the breath, like that was really nice to do. And I had come to the point before then where my formal practice, which is every day, was really a mindfulness practice. I would do loving kindness practice, walking down the streets of New York silently, on airplanes, things like that. And suddenly I wasn't doing any of that anymore. So I brought it back into my formal practice.
What is loving kindness practice? You wrote a book called Lovingkindness. I have read that, but for people who are listening who haven't, what is that practice?
Well, it sort of belongs in a class of practices I call a stretch. Like many practices, like the breath or mindfulness practices, are about bringing us closer to what's actually going on. These other practices are like stretching a little bit and looking at ourselves or looking at life from a slightly different angle. Not a phony angle, but maybe one that doesn't get much airtime. So, for example, if you're in the habit of evaluating yourself at the end of the day, and if you're in the habit, as many are, of pretty much only remembering the mistakes you made and the things you said wrong or whatever, it's a little bit of a stretch. Like, anything else happened today? Okay. Any good, So the formal practice is done through the silent repetition of certain phrases that are like gift giving or offering, like may be happy, may be peaceful. And we begin actually with offering those things to ourselves, that sort of well-wishing, that sense of blessing. Again, it's not phony or make-believe. You're not trying to force a certain feeling, but rather than go through the list of your faults one more time, never finding another fault, but just going through the same list again and again and again, we're going to stretch a little bit and just say, what happens if I offer myself, if I do this sense of gift giving or blessing to myself? And then with others, those who we may feel very close to, those who are further away from us, or and ultimately all beings everywhere, all of life.
So do you do that in meditation? You mentioned that you were walking around New York City. Is that a practice that you can do without sitting and closing your eyes? And
yeah, no, definitely. Well, they all are, but definitely, like with loving. Well, if you're walking, at any rate, you don't want to close your eyes.
Right.
But loving kindness, as long as you're silent, you can do it on the subway. You can do it. And people do it on Zoom too. They tell me, because they're watching all those faces in little boxes, and they might just go silently from box to box, thinking, may be safe, may be happy, may be peaceful, whatever it might be.
I want to put all of it together for a second and ask you about mindful communication, because it seems to me of all that you've talked about with loving kindness, mindfulness, meditation, how can we communicate more mindfully? And why, in your, expertise, why should we do it?
Well, I think we have to do it because, look at the world,
Yeah.
I mean, it's fractured. We hardly recognize ourselves in one another. Most communication, or for many people, could be it's symbolic. We're saying one thing, but really meaning another. And it's not easy to discern from the other person's point of view, and we're missing each other. And so I was always taken with the idea of the epidemic of loneliness, because people are expressing it. They were expressing it before the pandemic, you know, and it doesn't mean they're all alone all the time either, you know. But there's such a great feeling of missing, and so I think communication is essential, and I think communication training is fantastic, you know, and even though some of it may feel cliched in some way, like use I language or something, but it actually works. Like the example I always use is if you went to the movies with a friend and you walk out and they say, that was the best movie ever made. There's now not enough room in the universe for you to say, I didn't like it that much. You know, but if they say, I love that movie, you actually could say, well, I had some trouble with it. And then the communication can happen. So mindfulness comes in several ways, I think. First of all, it's knowing what you're feeling. Like it wouldn't be a surprise, say, to not realize you're kind of annoyed. You go off to the computer, for example, you type out the email, you press send, and then you go, whoops. I guess I said that with some hostility, you know. So
how do I get that back?
That's right. Well, remember, I don't know. You may not remember it. I am old enough to remember the days, like early days of email when if you were using a platform like AOL, there was a magic button called unsend.
Yeah.
And if the recipient of your nasty, hostile email was also on AOL, something in your computer would reach out to theirs and like pull it back. And
not so easy.
I once unsent an email. It wasn't that nasty, but I thought better of it. My friend wrote to me and said, the strangest thing just happened. I saw an email from you and it just dissolved. It disappeared. And I said, that's so weird. Like, you know, but life doesn't give us that many unsend buttons. And so knowing what you're feeling as it's beginning is a function of mindfulness. Knowing your intention. You know, and this is something I say if I'm brought into a company or an organization, like before a major meeting, before a big phone call, what is it that you really want to see? Do you want a resolution, or do you want to be seen as right? Do you want to help somebody, like mentor them? Do you want to grind them into dust? Like, what is your intention? We use mindfulness for that. And it's often subtle, you know, and mixed. It takes a good degree of mindfulness to see what's cooking. And then I think the willingness and mindfulness to try to say things in a way that, like using I language, or if you're supervising somebody at work, you realize I need to give them some information, not just say you're an idiot, you know? Like if they are going to change their behavior, they need some information. And so it's learning skills and being willing to use them. So
not mindful to say you're an idiot.
It's apparently not that useful.
It's not useful.
You're an idiot.
That could be your intention. So that brings me to, if you have an intention, you do this and you say, I know what I'm feeling. I know my intention. I'm going to try to say this in a certain way. It doesn't necessarily mean that the other side is doing the same work that you're doing. You could still end up in a minefield. So how do you handle that?
No, it's very true. I mean, I think all one can do in the end is check, do I have a sense of integrity about what I did and tried? And because with anything, you know, it's like if you go back to the idea of loving kindness or just gift giving, you can't guarantee how someone is going to receive a gift, right? We'd like to think as human beings, they're going to thank us, they're going to appreciate it, they're going to say it's the best book they've ever gotten in their life, you know? But it doesn't always work that way. And so, it doesn't always work that way right away. Sometimes we're really planting a seed, and sometimes we need the patience for that to see if something will unfold, you know, down the road in some way. So I think that's pretty well all we can do, and have a kind of kindness toward others, even if we're not agreeing.
This industry has probably changed dramatically over the last 50 years. I can't even imagine what it was when you first started. It's had a huge boom in just the last few years. What do you attribute that to?
Mindfulness industry, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't usually think of it as an industry, though.
Yeah, I know.
Uh,
It's kind of incredible to think of it like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, of course, that's very, very true. When I came back from India in 1974 as a teacher, it was so exotic still. And I was introduced somewhere as a mindfulness. No one used the word mindfulness as a meditation teacher. People would kind of sidle away like, oh, that's weird. Or, occasionally someone would say to me, did you meet the Beatles over there?
Right.
So it was altogether too weird. And I think it's largely a result of the research, the science, it's the relanguaging. I think people feel reassured that they, are not being asked to join a cult or even another tradition, to assume a dogma or any kind of belief system, really not. And I think there's more knowledge about that and more confidence in that. And people are willing to try it out. Sometimes it's presented in ways that are more appealing. You can sit at home alone with an app, or you could maybe your business or your, but whatever it is, and just checking it out. I think it's really great. And also, I think something the science has affirmed is that you don't have to sit in a pretzel-like pose. You don't have to sit in meditation 8 hours a day to see any results. I have a friend, Mishi Jha, who's a neuroscientist at University of Miami, and she works with very high-stress people like high-performance athletes and first responders and people in the military. And what her lab has found is that 12 minutes a day will actually bring results. And I always tease her, and say, I don't know if going for the bare minimum is all that healthy, but she's saying, look, these people are very stressed,
So
like
when
they
you're
want to
saying,
know.
when you say 12 minutes of meditation,
Yeah.
12 minutes of meditation, what is some of the science behind mindfulness?
Well, I should also say I meant formal meditation for Mishi.
Okay.
But there's also science saying if you don't ever do that, but you choose some activities, like not every time, but many times when I drink a cup of tea, something that isn't going to take forever. When I do it, I'm not going to be multitasking. I'm going to feel the warmth of the teacup. I'm going to smell the tea. I'm going to taste the tea. That too is said to bring results. For me, as a practitioner, a long-term practitioner, what I say, which is true for me, is that would become highly theoretical if I didn't also have a daily practice. Because I would think, oh yeah, that's true. You can just drink, but then I'd be drinking a cup of tea while Zooming, So I like that formal period. Well, there are all kinds of results, what she points to are things like increased executive functions, like better decision making, more clarity, you feel more centered. Is obviously a greater ability to let go and kind of be with what is. I think we look at some of those add-ons, the sense of isolation, the projection into the future. Some of them have a big grip on us. And the more we can loosen that grip, the more fulfilled we are. So I use the example of my friend, one of my colleagues, Sylvia Borstein, a lot as an example. Sylvia describes herself as a recovering catastrophizer. She's now 86. She said, not that long ago, if she calls one of her adult children, so her children are like way into their adulthood. If I call one of my adult children and they don't answer the phone, well, the worst must have happened. She had never occurs to me they're taking a shower or they fell in love. They don't feel like talking to their mother. It's got to be the worst. And she began meditating some years ago because her nervous system was so overcome with this stuff. And I bet her relationships were too. And what she would say is she has some of the same thoughts, but she can laugh at them. Or she can at least say, maybe I should check it out before I go down that tunnel, let me just check it out. And so I asked her not long ago, should I have a new mantra, a new saying I use with myself? So I said, what is it? And she said, not every bus ends up in a ditch.
Hmm.
So we get perspective, we get space, basically. And in that space, we can be creative. We can find other options.
How long did it take her to get there?
It's incremental. It doesn't take that long, I think, to see some change.
Yeah. Do you ever feel unsettled?
Yeah, sure.
Still 50 years into this, you feel that? And how do you experience that? How do you get through that?
I usually experience it in my body, and it's you could say it's like an old trauma reaction of something or another. And I have learned to recognize, for example, something I've said for a while, well, two things. One is looking at fear when it arises in me. I've come to see from the ability to be more mindful of it, that unlike the world's pronouncement that we're afraid of the unknown, which of course is true, I get afraid when I really think I do know, and it's going to be really bad. That's all the stories I start telling myself. Like, I'm going to go back to New York. I haven't been in my apartment for so long. I'm going to turn on the faucet. Didn't I read you can get Legionnaire's disease if you turn on the faucet?
Wow. Okay.
That's when the fear will arise. But I can see it, and I can see it quickly, and laugh, and also remind myself, you don't know. And once I do that, everything opens up. So that would be one example.
So I think what I hear a lot of people say, and I do practice, I have a practice. It could be better. And I'm probably speaking like a lot of people, always saying it's not good enough. I should do more. But I say that because I wonder, at what point am I there? Where am I trying to get? Can you help out with that?
Well, yeah. I don't think of it necessarily as a kind of goal or, something you're trying to reach for, but hopefully you're motivated by a real care for yourself, and increasingly so. And so we measure results, not so much. Let's say you're sitting 12 minutes a day, or she actually says 12 minutes a day, 12 minutes 3 to 5 times a week. And I say, I can't do that. That's just self-knowledge. Because for me, it would be Monday, and I'll think, I'll start on Wednesday. And it'll be Wednesday. I'll think, I'll do it 3 times on Saturday, and I'd never do it. But every day is every day. So that's a better structure for me, and for many. So I keep saying every day. So it's not in that period of time, like when you say you're formally sitting, that you will see the changes. You'll see them in your life, but that's not where we think to look for them. How you treat yourself when you've made a mistake, how you meet a stranger, how you meet somebody that you have like maybe a very old impression of them. Are you at least open to surprises? You just see lots and lots of changes in life, and they're real and they're important, but they are incremental, so there's not like a there, I think, where everything stops in terms of growth or change. It's kind of nice,
Thank you, I want to say, for clarifying that, because I think that those of us who are sort of novices at this have this idea that we're headed somewhere. And it's nice to hear you say that even 50 years in, no, you still do feel things. I think we think, oh, if I sit for 12 minutes a day, I will feel nothing. The world will be perfect. Everything will go my way. And that's that's not it. Things will be much better. Things will be much better. Life will be better. The way you feel about yourself will be better. The way you feel about other people will be better. You'll communicate better. Your relationships will be better. All of that. I'm curious to know, when you started, way back when you really started in that first trip, what happened for you that said, aha, this is it? Because you said something happened for me, but what happened for you?
I think the first sitting I did, the instruction was sit down and feel your breath. And I was a little bit contemptuous of the instruction. I thought, well, this isn't esoteric enough. It's not magical enough. I came all the way to India, Where's that thing that's going to totally change my life?
Okay, so you were like us. You were like the rest of
Yeah,
us.
yeah,
Okay.
sure. I was 18 years old, but in those days, like that first sitting was like, it was very hard for me. I couldn't concentrate. My mind was all over the place, but there was something so essentially true there for me. And that thought has never left in 50 years. Like, there's something true in here. And just the realization that I could let go, actually, of these thoughts. I didn't have to pursue them all the time. I didn't have to take everything to heart. I could let go gently. I could return and not judge myself and hate myself. Your mind wandered. You're awful. But like, okay, just start over. You can start over. It was enormous. It was like a revolution.
Yeah. Do you feel hopeful now that you see how expansive the industry is and what an impact that you have made in particular? Do you feel hopeful, or how does that make you feel?
I'm still astonished at it, like even hearing you call it an industry, I think, what industry? It's like, no, I do feel very hopeful. It's like, I have a retreat center here that we started in 1976. We had to close down. We reopened. People are really arriving, and it's really amazing to see, and I feel really good about it. I think it's very personal, and I think people understand that more and more. Like I taught recently on Zoom to this group in the financial industry, and they sent me a list of questions they thought, in case people didn't come up with questions, they thought I could address, and 100% it had to do with work. Like, I'm working from home now and I don't feel so connected to people. And when we actually did it, there were lots of questions and zero had to do with work.
Interesting.
It was all like, I feel a lot of anxiety. Do you think mindfulness can help me? I ruminate all the time. Do you think mindfulness can help me? And I was very taken with that. I was very struck with that. That people were really seriously thinking about the practice, not just a utilitarian thing that might help get them a promotion or something,
Right. It helps in all of their life, not just at work.
Yeah.
For people who don't have the practice or who are new to the practice, help us get started. What do you recommend to just get started?
I would say two things. Three things. One is get a little bit of knowledge. You could do that through a book. You could do that through an app. You could do that through listening to something online. Just because, if you have an idea, like good meditation is going to mean all thoughts are going to disappear. That's not going to happen. And you're going to struggle and suffer. And it's not meant to happen, because the point isn't to abolish your thinking, but let's say learn how to let go more gracefully and start over. So that little bit of knowledge is really, really useful. And then see what makes sense to you in terms of a commitment you could make, say, for a week or a month, whatever is right for you. 5 minutes a day, 12 minutes, 3 times a week, whatever it is. And take it up. Maybe take it up with some friends. You don't have to be physically together, but all kind of exploring this. And do a simple technique. You could use the breath and just something like that, to focus. And then the other thing I would say, the third thing is see about sprinkling some mindfulness into your activities. Like every now and then, don't multitask. Or, going back to communication, if you're about to have a phone call or a meeting, just check in on your intention. See what's cooking. And bring it into your life in these little ways. And it's really interesting and enjoyable.
I love that. I love that. That's wonderful. So a little bit of knowledge, and maybe you'll learn to let go and more gracefully, and then figure out what your commitment can be, and the challenge of sprinkling mindfulness into everyday life. Don't try to multitask. That's a big
Yeah,
challenge. The not
it's a big
multi
challenge.
yeah, the not putting the phone down.
Yeah,
Do you ever practice with your phone, with your
I
technology?
do. Well, Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Vietnamese Zen master, had this piece of advice. He's kind of famous for it. Don't pick up your phone on the first ring. Let it ring 3 times and breathe. And I was once years ago, I was in a financial firm teaching, and I gave that piece of advice, and I looked up and I saw the complete panic on everyone's faces. And I said, for you, maybe just twice, let it ring twice, and then pick it up. But whatever it is, it's the signal, that reminds us, like, oh, just take a breath. Because that pause is and we talk about communication, that pause is very potent, not to just react, but to pause for a moment and then say what you have to say or listen further.
Mm-hmm. Anything I didn't ask you, and I mean this, before I even asked that question, as you know, even preparing for this, there's so much depth to this work. So I'm going to ask you anything I didn't ask you, which is almost kind of ridiculous because there's so much that we can talk about and so many books and all that. Anything I didn't ask you that you want to mention, just to be helpful for listeners to get started maybe, or to stay with their practice, stick with it, get through these tough times in the world?
No, I mean, it helps, but, you could ask that, but I don't think, how long have you called it an industry? Does everyone call it an industry?
Yeah. Did you think when you started out doing this, did you think, I don't know if I'm going to make any money? I don't know if I can survive.
Any money, so.
You didn't make any money.
Make any money, so. Well, the tradition, which still holds for retreats here and some other places, is that teachers don't get paid, they get donations. And that it's sort of an Asian thing, and it's right out of the monastic tradition. And so that's the culture we brought over, and it doesn't work with industries or universities or, and so it's not what we do. But we opened this place in 1976. We charged $6.50 a night.
Oh, wow.
Of course, we only paid $150,000 for the whole thing, with 80 acres of land and sleeping 100 or something. But we didn't have $150,000 either. And we raised $50,000, which was a miracle. The Fathers of the Blessed Sacrament, who owned it was a novitiate, gave us a $50,000 mortgage. We couldn't get a bank to give us a mortgage. So 3 people went and got personal loans from the bank and gave us the money. And we opened the doors. So we didn't have any money. We slept on people's living room couches. And we never thought it was going to be like this movement or certainly not an industry. In fact, our mantra for the first year was, we can always close in a year. No one wants to learn how to meditate in this country. We'll just close it down.
Do you remember what your numbers were for the first year? How many people came in?
Well, and I don't remember the total, but in general, if we had 30, 35 people, we were ecstatic.
For the entire year?
No, for a course.
For a course. And how often are you doing the courses?
Well, it's on a cycle. We're not the only ones who teach, because teachers come and go. And so maybe there were 2 courses a month or, maybe 3. Mm-hmm. And then we began doing courses of different lengths. We had weekends, and we have a long course, which is 3 months. And then other things changed and other things expanded. And, it's just, it's a lot. It's a lot of, then we went online,
So. Right. And now you're selling books, and people are is there a wait list to come to the retreat there? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you just pinch yourself and say, I don't know what happened?
Well, even when I say I taught in, on Zoom to a group of financial advisors. I think, really? I did? Or a university? Or like, really?
Yeah. Well, I thank you. I really enjoy your work. I really enjoy the books. Which I have this Finding Your Way. I just bought that. That's your newest book, right?
Yeah, the gift book. Yeah.
Gift book, Meditations, Thoughts, and Wisdom for Living an Authentic Life. Great gift for the holidays, too. I love that. Okay, I'm going to ask you again. Is there anything because I can keep you here all day, anything I didn't ask you that you just want to mention before we close?
I don't think so. You did great.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being present and offering up all that you do offer. It's beautiful. And if a few people start, it just makes the world a better place. Sharon Salzberg, thank you so much for your work, taking the time to share all your wisdom.
It's a great delight. Thank you.